Kia ora, I'm Amos Mann. I'm a digital producer here at Te Papa.
Hi, I'm Theresa Cooper, and this is my sign name. I am a New Zealand Sign Language consultant here at Te Papa, focusing on access to arts.
We're here to tell you about how we made Te Papa's New Zealand Sign Language mobile guide, and we'd like to start by showing you some extracts from the NZSL guide.
New Zealand Sign Language, NZSL, is one of our official languages here in New Zealand. So a good place to start is with the New Zealand Sign Language Act 2006. The Act defines the deaf community as a distinct linguistic and cultural group of people who are deaf and use New Zealand Sign Language as their first or preferred language. There are over 5,000 people who identify as deaf. However, we have over 20,000 New Zealand Sign Language users according to the census 2018. This is likely to be underestimated. The Act reflects the fact that New Zealand Sign Language is a distinct language. It has its own grammar and syntax. It is not simply a signed version of a spoken language. This slide shows the principles of the New Zealand Sign Language Act. The government has a commitment to ensure services and information are accessible to the deaf community through the use of New Zealand Sign Language. As an advocate for the deaf community, I encourage you all to consider the key points and projects that you undertake within your organisation.
The Te Papa New Zealand Sign Language Mobile Guide is a new offering that we've developed in alignment to the principles of the Act with the deaf community, for the deaf community. The idea for this Te Papa project actually came from Theresa and from a conversation she had with an Australian colleague, Phil Harper, who at that time was running Connex U, an Australian sign language app for museums. Theresa had worked with Te Papa on NZSL projects previously. So from that conversation, Phil got in touch with Te Papa to suggest the idea. It's really interesting to me how the origins of a Te Papa project like this one can be found in a conversation arising from within the community independently of Te Papa. The project was kicked off by the Te Papa Digital Directorate that was in place at that time and was funded by the NZSL fund within the Ministry for Social Development.
The New Zealand Sign Language Fund and the New Zealand Sign Language Board, the board are actually members of the deaf community. They encourage and promote the use of New Zealand Sign Language. The fund is allocated to projects that promote the use of NZSL, and you can see the 5 principles up on the slide here. Acquisition, use and access, attitude, documentation, and status. This particular project focuses on the use and access of NZSL, with a focus on attitude and status.
The first activity undertaken for this project was a creative co-design workshop run with representatives of deaf organisations and members of the deaf community, as well as key Te Papa staff members on the project. And some of you may remember at a previous NDF, Karen Bryce presented on this co-design workshop. Now, I wasn't there, but I've been working with the materials generated in the workshop, and in my opinion, this was gold standard for co-design. We've learned so much from this workshop, and the outcomes were both very informative as well as creative. Now, Theresa, you were a community participant in the co-design workshop. So what was your experience of the workshop?
Well, originally I didn't run to how I was expected. Once we were working all together, we had a range of activities, and I sort of got more of an idea or overview, overall concept as to how it would come together. I actually found the experience really valuable, and it sort of reclarified and confirmed what we were there to do. By doing this journey map, we had a range of deaf perspectives and ideas, and it sort of brought us all together. By the end of the workshop, we had really common goals and outcomes for this project.
So Te Papa synthesised what we were told by the deaf community into 6 key goals for the project. Theresa, would you like to lead us through the goals?
So the deaf community, they actually told us that they wanted more access to information in NZSL. They felt like they missed out on a lot of it. They told us they need ways to have shared experience so that the museum can be experienced with friends and family, and so that it could also be an educator to their children. Many deaf community members felt they needed orientation and wayfinding because they couldn't ask staff for help. One of the comments was that they needed exhibition rules and guidelines so that the children and the family wouldn't be told off by members of the Te Papa team. We need Te Papa staff to have the right tools to be able to help, because communicating with the staff is really difficult. We also needed to see deaf people as part of the Te Papa story, so that things were explained from a deaf worldview, and also to have that sense of ownership and pride.
And in many ways, these goals are universal. They're fundamental goals for every visitor. So I was asked to take on the project in February 2020 after big changes at Te Papa meant that the Te Papa team members that started work on this project weren't able to continue. This slide shows the way that we structured the project, with myself as product owner and with Theresa as NZSL consultant, and with advisors from Deaf Aotearoa and Arts Access Aotearoa forming an advisory group. Development and production kicked off in March 2020. We started just before the first lockdown. The NZSL mobile guide was created by an in-house team working closely with the advisors group, with Theresa, who joined the team as deaf consultant, and we contracted services from deaf-led businesses. But before we had a chance to get stuck into creating the mobile guide itself, the very first output was an NZSL welcome to play in the foyer for reopening the museum after lockdown under COVID Alert Level 2. This was very well received by the community, and we were very encouraged by this early positive feedback the project received. With the Te Papa team, we undertook user experience design, user interface design, and software development. The mobile guide software is developed on the ACME open source audio guide web app. So great thanks to Seb Chan, Lucy Patterson, and the team at ACME. We undertook design and production of a system of print graphics as linking onboarding touch points throughout the museum. And we based the experience design on a standard visitor journey, asking what are the fundamental things that all visitors need at each step of their visit to the museum. But we also knew we needed to keep the content structure versatile and open to access from any point in a visitor's journey.
The design for journey, it's really important for deaf visitors to be able to plan their visit. So on the website, we actually have a web page called Plan Your Visit. So deaf people or deaf visitors can play the videos and have a sense of feeling of what the experience will be like before they actually arrive to the museum. We also created content for the screen in the foyer, sorry. So then deaf people can orientate and navigate their journey once they arrive to the museum. So that's in the foyer at the front entrance as you lead into the museum.
We created two journeys within the guide itself. One being What's at Te Papa, which provides a general overview and introductions to some of our permanent exhibitions, and Take a Tour, which is a tour of some of Te Papa's top attractions. Content development, content production was undertaken in-house, led by the writing team, working with curators, and the deaf-led company Deaf Radio joined the project, and we worked with them to cast deaf NZSL presenter talent. They provided translation services and undertook video production. There are some views from behind the scenes showing our approach to filming on site, on location.
So you can see just on these slides that the filming in the building here actually provided a lot of authenticity and context. If it's filmed off-site, it's actually quite difficult to create that same connection to the exhibitions. Whereas when you're on site, you almost feel a part of it. So when a deaf visitor is watching the video, it gives them a sense of connection. Some of the videos we actually did film in studio with a plain background. It gave more of an overview of the videos on site.
All of the NZSL videos are captioned in English and Te Reo Māori. So this, in some ways, is a trilingual project.
Captioning is really important for the deaf community. We have deaf and hard of hearing members within our community, and they have a range, varying levels of New Zealand Sign Language fluency. And also with families, there are different levels of language that are used. Some may be familiar with New Zealand Sign Language, while others may be learning or know very little. So it's important for us to have that captioning so everyone can watch the content at the same time.
And then in February 2020, we launched. The Te Papa marketing and communications team consulted with our advisory group and focused the traditional media towards a celebration of deaf community culture and language, and focused on a celebration of accessibility, steering them away from focusing on sympathy for the community from an ableist perspective, which can happen sometimes with media, with some media.
We really needed to put the information out there so it was more accessible. Social media is fantastic. By networking with various deaf organisations, including Deaf Aotearoa, we're able to get the word out there about this mobile guide. The deaf community are thirsty for information, and we often rely on social media, friends within the deaf community as well, to pass on that information. There are various sort of platforms that we use that are more visible for the deaf community. It brings us together. We can see sign language in videos. We use platforms such as YouTube, Glide, and Instagram, for example.
A tremendous highlight for the project was the launch. The deaf community were welcomed onto Tongarewa with karakia and with mihi whakatau. This was an important acknowledgement of the growing relationship between Te Papa and the deaf community. By way of thanks, here are the credits showing all those external to Te Papa that contributed to the project, including government agencies, deaf NGOs, deaf-led businesses, deaf presenter talent, deaf community members, and NZSL interpreters. Ngā mihi nui. And then there are all the teams that worked on this project or were part of this project from within Te Papa. I'm sure I've left a few off. But now what we have is a system, a process, and the know-how for low cost and efficient delivery of content in NZSL. So we're a few steps closer towards our offerings becoming trilingual.
Now that we've shared our experiences with you all about creating the NZSL mobile guide, we can now put focus on what your organisations can do to increase your use of sign language in your own projects. I'll outline a few how-tos as a bit of a guide. So how to clarify your why. Before you start the project, it's really important to think about your why before you engage with the deaf community. What's the value of creating this project? Ask yourself, are you using New Zealand Sign Language because it's an official language for equal status perhaps, or to become more accessible? I think we need to be careful that sign language, well, there's a few risks. We don't want New Zealand Sign Language to be tokenism. Involve the deaf community from the get-go. So work within your network and your local deaf community. There are different communities have different needs. So working with your local community and also include your existing deaf audience members. You may know of people who you've connected with in the past. How to collaborate on planning with the deaf community. So collaborate actively throughout using the workshop, co-design and journey mapping, learning and understanding the world through a deaf lens, all while recognising the needs of the community. A holistic view of what is possible, and also the priorities of what will be valued at that point in time. Collaborate building the project. Receive advice, ongoing advice and guidance throughout your network. You may have a deaf community rep or an advisory group. Really important to have members of the deaf community throughout the consultation period. Involve deaf-led businesses. And make sure that the project has a deaf leader within the project itself.
These are some resources to help you and your organisation increase accessibility and use of NZSL. For foundation thinking, look to the NZSL Act, and there are resources from key organisations that are super helpful for this foundational thinking. Lots of great organisations out there. And then as you begin to strengthen your thinking, look to your own policy, start budgeting for community engagement and consultation. But remember, before thinking about what you will do, really do think about the who and connecting with the who it is that you're going to be working with on this and who this is for. And so for engagement with local NZSL and deaf community, school up on how to work with interpreters. If you don't have any funds at this stage to hire interpreters, there are funding sources available for community engagement and organisational learning in this area. And then once you've engaged with local NZSL and deaf community and understand more about the goals and what the project will be, you can look at options for project funding. But remember to ensure collaboration from the outset and have those letters of support from the deaf community in your application. And just to note, there are some changes happening in the government landscape around accessibility at the moment. And we've been advised that Access Alliance website is a good place to keep up to date on these changes. Great thanks to Stace Robertson at Arts Access Aotearoa for providing us with these resources to share with you. Lastly, we really want to look at the evaluation of this project. A few months after launching, we ran focus group sessions with deaf community to evaluate the mobile guide. We received very positive feedback. The majority of focus group participants felt that NZSL mobile guide increased accessibility, increased the visibility of NZSL at Te Papa, and felt that it has the potential to increase the positive experiences of deaf visitors to Te Papa. However, some community members told us they wanted more in-depth information. They found the info a bit limiting. And so now that we're providing this, the basic info about the museum and exhibition overviews and a tour, this is really great direction, this feedback, for the next step, providing deep dive NZSL content. Some of the workshop, the feedback that we received in the focus group workshops pointed that people found using their phone to access NZSL wasn't that great an experience while trying to explore the physical museum. And instead, they've asked for content to be shown on screens within the gallery, side by side with English and Te Reo Māori. And again, this is a really great piece of feedback that we can design into exhibitions from the get-go. We'd like to leave you with a short video that we posted on social media, which Theresa and our social media advisor at the time, Jack, worked on. And we were asking members of the deaf community what they think about the Te Papa New Zealand Sign Language Mobile Guide.
Hi, what are you thinking about the NZSL Mobile Guide?
I think it's an awesome app. I think it's wonderful for everyone. If you don't have a guide available, then you can just use this on your mobile phone. I think it's great. You don't have to rush around. You're not missing out when you're with a group guided tours. So I think it's fantastic. Wonderful for deaf people. They can take their time going through the exhibitions. All the information is already there.
Yeah, and also you were showing the video to your child. How did that make you feel in terms of access for your child?
I feel it's perfect for me and my child. So sign language is his first language. It's what we use in the home. So naturally babies used to using sign language. So I think it would be great for hearing and deaf children, to be honest. I think this is going to be a great device.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.